Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of the 1976 TR6 that we are working on in the Rusty Beauty's garage. And today we're gonna move on to some other jobs that need to be completed. As you can see, he is at the lift area, and I'm saying he because Tom named the car Angus. So I'm assuming that's a guy. Anyway, we still have the block here and the engine parts spread all over the place here. I spent some time yesterday cleaning up the water pump and covers and some of the parts that are gonna be painted. But today, like I said, Angus is already on the lift area, so we're gonna put him in the air and we're gonna start dealing with some other projects that we have to do on him, and they are most of them or some of them under the car. So we're gonna deal with those first. There's some issues that we need to deal inside too. Just from the top of my head, the heater doesn't work, and now that we have the transmission out, it might be easier to reach underneath. I don't know if I can remove it without removing the dash though. But Tom is planning to join us next year for the trials, which is going to be in October in Fontana Bay. So it's going to be cold, I guess, in October, and he's going to need the heater, so we're going to have to figure that out. There's a small water leak somewhere there. The overdrive switch needs to be taken care of, and that's about it inside, I think. The rest of it is in the rear suspension. Well, the front hubs, we're gonna rebuild the front hubs as well, but the rear suspension is gonna have a total upgrade. So that's where we're gonna start. So let me put him in the air and we're gonna talk more about it. Okay, so we are under the car. And while we are waiting for the missing components here to come back and fill their cavity, we will go in the back. And wow, there's lots of oil here. Anyway, I'm gonna go in the back, take this baby down, because look at that, it's leaking. And we're gonna change the seals. We're gonna install a plug right here. I'm gonna inspect the bearings and all that. And while it is out, this big baby, we're gonna reinforce. Oh wow, we're gonna reinforce these differential mounts that now I see it has been repaired. You see, there's a weld there that I haven't seen before. I've been under this car, but I haven't seen it. Anyways, it's coming down, and like we said, so while it's out, we're gonna reinforce these differential mounts, and we're gonna replace these axles, and most importantly, the hubs, because you know these are a weak spot for Triumphs. I've seen recently this season 2 cars that lost wheels, so it's scary. So for that we have a good parts setup, so we're gonna install that when the time comes. Looking here, look at this. This has been cracked at some point, and the reason for that is this tube shock conversion that is really badly designed, and I see that they keep selling it the way it is without any reinforcement on the frame. Well, for this car last season, or 2 seasons ago actually, I made and installed these gussets here. When we take the wheel off, you're gonna see them better, because we didn't want it to crack anymore. I mean, looks like it's been cracked and then repaired, but still gusset was not added. Anyway, we're not gonna touch that because after we installed the gussets and all that, the owner took the car for alignment, so the wheels are aligned and everything, so we don't want to touch here anymore. It is nice and solid. It hasn't changed for 2 years after we installed the gusset, so it's okay. So let me figure out how I'm gonna take this differential down. I've never done this on the lift. I've taken dozens of differentials down and back up, but on the floor, laying on my back. Now we have the lift, which makes things easier, but does it really? Because now what happens is this is like 6 feet off the ground, or 5 or whatever. So I have to figure out a different way now. Before I was able to put a jack underneath and lower it slowly. Now it's gonna be easier for me to work here without laying on my back. But how am I gonna take it down? We'll see. We're gonna have to figure out a way. Okay, now we're gonna start taking the axle out. I don't think we need to remove brakes or anything. The brake shoes look good. So let's take the hub out with half of the axle. There's no, look at that. Nothing is holding this boot there anyway, but we're not reusing it. So now we're gonna start removing these 6 studs from here that we're hoping are not stripped. You know what, before I loosen them, I'm gonna see if they are stripped or not, because sometimes people just realize that they're stripped but they do nothing about it. So I'm gonna go really gently and try to tighten them. No, which is good. Yeah. So you may or may not know that these are notorious to be stripped. Okay, they're all good because they go into the aluminum trailing arm and people over torque them and they strip the threads inside the trailing arm. The torque here is 14 to 16 foot-pounds, which I demonstrated before. It's literally, I can do that with one finger on my torque wrench, of course, so it was a little bit longer, but still it is very, very little. So before we pull this out, let me show you the gusset that I made and installed here a few years ago, because when Tom bought the car, it came with the tube shock conversion and it already came with all these repairs done. You see that? Obviously, when they installed the tube shock conversion, the frame cracked, then they welded it and they still didn't do anything about installing gussets. I had to install them for Tom. So you have to be careful if you're installing tube shock conversion. Definitely you need something to support it from going this way. I personally don't see any benefits of a tube shock conversion. I think that the Armstrongs are pretty good as long as you maintain them, keep them filled with oil and all that. So anyway, here you don't need to take the brake mechanism apart. Somebody was trying to convince me a long time ago that you have to take them apart. No, you don't. You can even take the whole entire axle this way, even though it's easier to take one half this way and the other one the other way. But if you want to, you can take the entire axle out this way. You just need to start it. Get it going. There we go. This spring here is catching, but you can just lift it up a little like this and that's all. Now you can pull it out. Of course, before that you need to remove the zip tie or wire on this boot. In this case we didn't need to do anything. So these are the splines that are also notorious for having a little bit of play in them. So we will see if these are in a good shape. We're gonna recommend that Tom keeps them as a spare or sells them because they're hard to find. And that's it here. Now I'm gonna go underneath and I'm gonna take the other end apart, remove the axle, and then we're gonna do the same on the other side. By the way, I keep threatening that I'm gonna close the garage door and I'm gonna keep it closed for the rest of the season, and every day I'm getting surprised. It is hot today again, probably 15 degrees Celsius, which is 60 something American Fs. Not complaining, just saying, you know, I like it. I almost don't feel like working. I can pull out a chair here and just sit on my phone all day. Okay, the other half is out as well, and I already put them back together, and look at that. I don't know if you see it, but there's a lot of play here. So this is a weak spot. Also a weak spot is this shaft, this yoke with the shaft that goes through the hub and it gets bolted here. So this is one part, and sometimes what happens is as you're driving, it snaps right in the middle, and the hub with this part of the shaft stays on the car, but your wheel with the flange and small part of the shaft decides to go a different route. And here somebody's done something. I guess the hub developed a play and they torqued it somehow. I don't know. Like, why is this smashed like that? You can't do that because there's spacers inside, and doesn't matter how much you torque, you shouldn't be able to correct the play. But maybe they did. Maybe there's no spacer inside, or I don't know. Anyway, but we are done with that. The conversion that we're gonna install later has an upgraded hub and also CV joints here and here instead of U joints. So it is much better. Okay, we are on the other side. I removed this wheel as well, and this time I disconnected the inner half of the axle first so I can pull everything. And as I split it, oil dripped right from there, from inside. So this is something that I discovered recently. I mean, in the last 2-3 differentials that I serviced, I do something to prevent that, because I couldn't believe the first time that oil is leaking from inside here, from inside the flanges. Anyway, when we start servicing the differential, I'll show you how it comes out. It is basically around the woodroof key on the shaft and behind this big washer that we have there. What I do is, before I put the washer, I put a gasket maker there behind the washer to prevent leaking from there, because you have new seals, new everything, and then all of a sudden there's still a leak. You know, that's where it comes from. And it was a lot. Look, that was a lot of oil that was just sitting between the two flanges and seeping through and dripping from there. Okay, so the two axles are out. The drive shaft is out a long time ago, and as you can see also the exhaust is out. So if you're doing this job on a car that is not taken apart, you definitely need to take the exhaust out, that's for sure. The drive shaft though, you don't need to. Now it is taken out for a different reason. So the only 4 bolts that are holding now the diff up are these. So I'm gonna see what I'm gonna do here. I have this table which is very flimsy. I have this stand, tool stand, that is a little bit lower than the tables. If I bring the lift halfway down, I might be able to put this under the differential. We just need to put a flat piece of wood there and might be able to drop the differential on it and then lift the car up. The problem with this lift is that I have only 2 positions, safety positions. One is there and one is there. So I can bring the car halfway down here, but I don't have a medium spot. I can put it at any height, but the lift is not gonna be safe, and I don't want to experiment with that. I know, it's in my plans. I can drill more holes there to make more positions available, but that's a project for a different time. These are 1, 2, 3, 4 holes per level that I need to do, and they have to be measured and precise height, etc., etc. So it's not gonna be today. Anyway, I'm gonna bring it halfway down now to see if that's gonna be easier, but before that I'm gonna loosen the bolts and make sure that I don't have problems with that. Okay, I brought it on the lower level and it actually fits just above the table, and with these pieces of 2x4 or 4x4, whatever they are, I think I can lower the rear end first and then the front end and just drop it down on the table. Okay, so it wasn't great. I mean, I have to figure out different way. I'm gonna have to build a cradle that supports it from underneath, and it is just the exact height, so it supports it. I don't know. It's not only a matter of keeping it where it is, but it also needs to wiggle a little bit. It needs to go, the rear end needs to go down, then slide out, and because the front end, this part here, is really stupidly made. These ends here, here and here, are wider than here and here on the frame. So it needs to go this way first, and then the rear end needs to go up. So if I make some kind of a cradle, I need to be able to adjust the height of the rear end so I can slide it in and out. I don't know, we're gonna figure it out. For now, let me take it outside and clean it a little bit before we deal with it. So I cleaned only this part, the housing, with a little bit of Varso, a brush, some wire brushes, etc. And the reason why I cleaned only this part is because everything else is gonna come off and we can wash it in the parts washer. Actually, I mean, this cover is coming off. I can take it to the parts washer and clean it properly. This whole entire bracket is coming off. That can be cleaned in the parts washer. The two output shafts are coming off. These can be cleaned in the parts washer when they're taken apart. The only part that I don't want to take to the parts washer is this, because I don't want to take apart the crown and the pinion, etc., etc., if we don't have to. And I don't want to put cleaning products inside, you know. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm not gonna work on it now, but I'm gonna take out this cover and we're gonna put it here for the oil to drain, and we're gonna let it drain as far as it can go while we are working on the diff mounts. Now, if we are only changing seals on the output shafts and the pinion, we don't need to take this cover out. However, I'm taking it out because we're gonna be also drilling and installing, that's the top, but on the bottom we're gonna be installing a drain plug, and for that I want to catch all the shavings, right? We don't want to leave them in the differential, so that's why we're taking the cover off, and we're gonna renew the gasket, of course. Okay, we're gonna let it drain here for the time while we are working on the mounts. So let's see what the situation here is. Sit on the office chair. Welcome to my office. So you see, this was already repaired. Dun, dun, dun. So for those of you who don't know, this is a very weak spot of the TR6 frames. It's just a bad design, and for whatever reason, probably because of the way the drive shaft spins, it is putting more load on the right side and less on the left. So usually the one that cracks is the one on the right. You see, this one has absolutely no issue, but we're gonna box it too. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna box this section. We're gonna cut off this old metal here We're gonna put new studs and all that. So let me clean up this area a little bit so stuff doesn't fall on my head, and then we're gonna get crack-a-lacking. Okay, so I cleaned it somewhat, and these two we're not gonna touch. They sell kits for reinforcing these two, but I've never seen one of these crack. The weak spots are up there, and like I said, mostly on the right side. So these two we're gonna reinforce, and we're gonna do them of course one by one so we can keep the geometry here. But before we cut anything, let's measure. I've done this before and I have it somewhere in videos, so I can use that video as a reference, but let's measure it here too so we are 100% sure that that's correct. So we're gonna measure the distance between these two studs, we're gonna measure the distance between these two just in case, we're gonna measure the distance between this one and this one, and this one and this one of course, and we're gonna measure the diagonals. And also we need to measure the height of the studs, but that's gonna be after. So let's measure this first. And how I measure, instead of center to center, I measure from this end to this end, and that is the same thing. It's just much easier to measure. So this here is 10 and 3/8. I know you don't see, but I see. So 10 and 3/8. This is 8 and 3/16. This is just shy of 13, maybe 12 and 15/16. What about this one? This one is 13. So let's go with 13. And the diagonals are exactly 16. Yeah. So 10 and 3/8, 8 and 3/16, 13 and 13, and 16 and 16. Now about the height, we're gonna measure here from the shoulder of the stud to the plate here. Not from the end, because the threads might be longer, shorter, whatever, but the shoulder is where the washer goes. So this shoulder is 1914, so 1 inch and 914 thousandths. And about this plate though, this is a problem because this here is not parallel to this, so it is hard to measure, but maybe, okay, let's measure it this way. Parallel to the wall here, 2.28, and this side, I don't know how to measure this. I don't know. I haven't done it like this before, but what I'm gonna do this time is I'm gonna measure from the frame up to there. So I can put this here and measure like this. So that's 4 7/8. Okay. Now we know what we need to know, and I can start cutting these one by one and replacing them. Okay, so you see this was barely holding, the entire thing here was barely holding. The top part of the stud was snapped long time ago. It was holding only here and here and here, probably on 3 spots. So I started cutting it, but I saw it shaking, so I realized that it's not holding much up there. So it was a good idea to replace it. So yeah, The other part was this weld here that was like that, and you see this is, I don't know if it was ever welded properly or after it was welded it snapped, but it looks to me like it was never actually welded properly. It looks like the weld was never holding. They just welded next to the crack. So anyway, I'm gonna strip these now, and on this side, normally if that's the original weld, like here, if you just core it with your cutting wheel here and cut here, you grab this and you wiggle it and the rest of the weld snaps. Here though, it looks like they welded it on the sides as well, like here, and that's why it didn't snap. So now I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna remove that part from there. Or maybe I can just put a piece of metal on top and weld this around. If we leave this hole open on top, water might enter. So yeah, we're gonna repair that. Okay, I'm gonna continue here removing this. Hopefully the brake line is not gonna be in our way. Alright, so this is cleaned up now as far as I could, and now we can patch it. It would be great if we could leave a hole here, put the stud through and weld from above. That's how it is designed. That's what you normally do. There's a plate that comes with the kit that usually goes on top of the frame and you weld it all over, and the stud goes into that plate, and also it is welded around. The problem is here, obviously we don't have access on top and we don't want to cut holes and do stupidities. When I weld from underneath, I just put the plate inside. I'll show you how. So for this reason, I don't need this hole anymore. So I'm gonna make a patch for here out of these cut-off pieces. Pretty solid metal, so it can be reused. Looks like it's been cut here when they were repairing it. Before they made a cut here that was never welded. So we're gonna weld this first, we're gonna patch this, we're gonna grind it, and then I'm gonna bring you back. I'm not gonna hold you for these repairs here. Okay, that looks better, and now we can start building it up. So let me show you first what comes with the kit. Okay, so this is half of the kit, obviously. The other half is still in the box. This is for one side. So this is to replace that bracket that we just cut off. This goes inside the rails that we just repaired. This is the top of the rail, so there must be a hole. What we just repaired here, we leave a hole there, the stud goes through, comes out. On the other side, we put this on top. The stud sticks out like a 1/4 inch, I believe. You see it is long enough for that. Sticks out through the hole, so we weld around, and then we weld this all over the place on top of that rail. So this is the rail that we just repaired, my hand. And then after that, these come inside the rail again and get welded all over the place, and we weld this here to the rail as well, and it is super solid, and the other one goes on the other side, of course. However, when you're working from underneath, that's not really possible. So what I do is I weld this inside like that. This is the interesting part here. We need to change the angle here a little bit of this hole so we can put this on an angle, because the top rail is not horizontal. It is a little bit on an angle, but well, maybe we can weld it like that. if we want. We can fill this with weld, it's going to be stronger. And then we put this assembly like that inside up there, and we weld around inside, and only then this can go up and can be welded here, and then we can put the sides. However, we have a measurement here, right? Remember, this measurement from the shoulder to here was 1.914 inches, I believe. So we have to make sure that we cut this stud just long enough so we can do what we just said without drilling a hole on the rail up there. So the distance center to center here was what? 10 3/8, right? This means that from here to here it needs to be 10 3/8, assuming that these are the same width, which they are. So I know you don't see it, but I do. So this thingy should fit something like that inside. Yeah. So this position we don't worry too much about for now, this direction, because this is gonna come out again. For now we want to shorten this, right? So it goes like this. Okay, so that's the distance, and I'm gonna zero it here, and I'm gonna reduce it by 1.914 here. So this is how much we need to shorten this thingy. Alright, so after I tacked it here, I took some measurements and it wasn't perfect. It was closer to 10.5 to 10 3/8, this distance. So I had to cut it here, my tack, and I moved it, I positioned it again. You saw I was using this clip, paper clip, with piece of cardboard inside to hold this to the correct height so I can position it, measure, and do everything before I go too far. So I put it again, tacked it, measured one more time. All the measurements are correct, so I went ahead and I tacked it here, even inside there, tacked it here, so this can't move anymore. Tacked it over there as well, so that plate can't move. And now in this position, I'm gonna go ahead and weld as far as I can in that corner, in this corner. I'm gonna weld it here as far as I can, here, and even here. I mean, if I don't weld it here now, I'm not gonna be able to weld it after. So I'm gonna weld it here, and then this plate can step on top of that weld. You see, there's room for it. Or I might weld it a little bit open like that. It doesn't really matter as long as it is boxed. We're not. So that's how far I could go inside. Some of the welds, especially these on the lower there, are not great, but here inside I'm more concerned about the top plate, because that needs to be solid, because that's what holds the top end of the stud, right? The lower plate we're gonna weld here now, here, and to the entire side plates, so we still have lots of places to weld this lower plate. So that's it. I'm gonna put the side covers now, and we're gonna weld them. Okay, so welded, and I know it's not great in some areas because it's dark, and even though it is much easier to weld than when you're laying on your back, still here you don't even have the angle that you want for your torch, so it doesn't look great in some area. In some area I had to go 2 or 3 times, especially here. Like you see, I can't even show it on camera here. Sorry, I had to go 3 times there because I couldn't do it properly, but most of it is not bad. One thing is for sure, it might not be beautiful, but it is solid. So now I'm gonna take an angle grinder. I'm gonna grind here, and especially here we want to grind this nicely because we want to be able to put the mount up there. We want to be able to slide it all the way up, and once this is done we can do the same here. So let me grind it and I'll bring you back. All right, it is all ground. I mean, not all, only here and here and this, and that's more than enough. This side I would consider ready. I'm not gonna paint it yet. I'm gonna do this side as well, and then we're gonna paint everything together, and we're gonna see what the next job is gonna be here. But we have multiple jobs under the car that we want to do now. Okay, so the other one is done as well. They look pretty good to me. Let me see. Yeah, solid. So now I'm gonna paint it. I'm gonna use truck bed liner. That's my favorite paint for under the car, and we're gonna call this a video. In the next one probably we're gonna take care of the diff so we can install it back. But also here we have to change, we have new brake hoses. I was discussing with Tom also a possibility of changing all the brake lines, but I think they're in a pretty good shape. They don't need anything. So we can save him at least that. And we're gonna start installing also the good parts axles when we have the diff in. So that's gonna be everything for today, guys. Thank you for watching, commenting, subscribing, sharing, and supporting me. It is really, really appreciated. Stay tuned for the next video. Probably take care of the differential, change seals, gaskets, etc, etc. We're gonna check also some end plates and stuff like that, and we're gonna install it up here. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.